Ah, Pokémon, my absolute favorite game franchise with zero evidence to claim the contrary. Hello, Nintendo? I need to play Pokemon ASAP, and I think my 3DS is broken. Help! Do I have a Switch? No.
Pokemon has always been famous for being exclusive to handheld devices, often to the dismay of Pokemon fans. Up until the Nintendo Switch, there has never been a complete, full mainline experience released for a home console, and even the Switch is still mostly a handheld device. That said, there have been spin-offs of Pokemon games designed for home consoles, like Stadium, XD, and Pokepark on the Nintendo 64, GameCube, and Wii respectively, among countless others.
Seriously, countless others. I can't count them. Please don't ask me to. I'm incapable of counting.
Most of you probably already know about these. Pokemon is one of the most well-known media franchises in existence, and Nintendo consoles are where their games belong. Right? Pokemon for PC and mobile. How in the world did this happen?
Bribery.
Pokemon has developed games for your silly little computer and your silly little iPhone since as early as 1999. And when I say developed for, I mean specifically for PC and mobile. We're not talking about emulation here.
It feels really strange to think about that, because in my eyes, and I'm sure in many of yours, Pokemon has always been a super protective company who would never get their games off actual game consoles. But I did my research and it seems that there are a fair amount of official Pokemon games for non-Nintendo devices since Pokemon began. Before we start checking those out though, I'd like to thank this video's sponsor, Factor 75.
Factor 75 delivers great, fresh, and ready-made meals directly to your door, and cuts out the hardest part of making delicious and healthy food. By far the most stressful part of eating healthy for me is all of the prep work. I'm a busy guy, and thankfully with Factor 75, that's not an issue. Factor's meals are ready to go within a matter of minutes, and it's genuinely as fast as fast food, and a whole lot better. Factor 75 also has a ton of options, making their ready-made meals accessible to nearly any diet. Whether you're keto, vegan, vegetarian, or just wanting to watch your calories, Factor 75 has excellent meals to fit your food plans. If you're even remotely curious what Factor 75 has to offer, check them out using the link in the description or scan the QR code on screen right now for 50% off your first order. Alternatively, you can visit go.factor75.com and use the code FACTORSE33028 at checkout for the same discount. Thank you again, Factor 75, for sponsoring this video, and thank you again for using my links when I have them and continuing to support the future of this channel. First on the docket is... oh no. Are those cards? Cards! Pokemon has always been a multimedia project, between video games, the anime, and of course the trading card game. When all three became the sensation they were, everyone knew there'd have to be some sort of intersection between the card and video games, which came to the Game Boy in 1998 called Pokemon Trading Card Game.
Real creative, guys.
However, just a year later they released Pokemon Play It, a digital simulation of the card game entirely for Windows. It was extremely limited, only providing players with 4 total pre-made half-decks, and requiring that they play with only those cards against an AI opponent. Thankfully, in the year 2000, the game got a Windows-only sequel, giving players 7 total decks to choose from, which is a lot more in line with a real card game. Truth be told, it was inevitable that these games would exist, but looking back now, knowing about the Pokémon Company, it feels extremely weird to see this on a PC. You'd think that they would have put it on the Nintendo 64 or something, but no, it's right there on Windows. It feels a lot weirder when you consider that Pokemon didn't put another copy of the trading card game on PC until 2011, with Pokemon TCG Online. This is a much more faithful online simulation of the trading card game, allowing you to play with all the cards available at the time against other players online. You can play via web browser or download a copy of the game for Windows, Mac, iOS, and Android. Again, we all knew that a video game version of the card game had to happen, but still very weird to think about it coming to these platforms instead of being stuck on a console of Nintendo's. There were a few other fun PC projects under the Pokemon umbrella, like Pokemon Masters Arena, which was a browser-based collection of minigames akin to those in the Pokemon Stadium games, or Pokemon 2000, a tie-in game for the Pokemon 2000 movie designed like Wolfenstein 3D by Cyberworld International. Are you kidding me? Shame this game only seems to have existed for 4 weeks, because it sounds awesome! But ultimately, Pokemon's PC offerings are, and always have been, pretty lacking. It's mostly educational games designed to teach young kids internet literacy. I think this is why it seems so jarring to see that they put the card game on PC as early as 1999, because that's pretty much the only real Pokemon game on PC. It feels weird, right?
However, there's a wholly different story on the mobile front.
By 2015, the mobile game market had gotten quite popular, with games like Angry Birds, Cut the Rope, and Candy Crush going truly viral. It clearly caught the attention of the Pokémon Company, and they decided to try 2 different experiments to see if it's a good market for them. The first experiment was rather simple, porting one of their 3DS game spin-offs to mobile stores, which they did in 2015 with Pokémon Shuffle, a free-to-play puzzle game on both the 3DS and mobile. It was a fairly average puzzle game and saw decent enough success on mobile, but come on, it's Pokémon Shuffle. This was never going to reach the heights the Pokémon Company wanted.
Ah, well, might as well pack their bags and give up on the mobile market.
Pokémon Go, the mobile game that took the world by storm. I'm so glad Pokémon decided not to give up after Shuffle, because this second experiment, an entirely new and unique game that couldn't work on any other device, was the perfect move to bring Pokémon to mobile devices. Pokémon Go used your phone's GPS and augmented reality functions to place Pokémon in the real world for you to catch and train, encouraging players to go outside and explore the surrounding areas while playing. It was the truest way possible to adapt the Pokémon experience to a mobile market, and they did so phenomenally well. At launch in 2016, Pokémon Go only had the original 151 Pokémon, and while that sounds like a negative, it ironically boosted the popularity of the game, making it simple enough for anyone to pick up and understand, and also catering to the nostalgia of everyone who grew up with those original Game Boy games, making the game popular with everyone from kids to 40-year-olds. Of course, as time went on, the game got more and more updates, adding new Pokémon and new mechanics, but I will never forget that original summer when Pokémon Go first came out. I dragged my dad and brother to all the local parks and spent far more time outside than I ever had for any reason.
So clearly this showed the Pokémon Company that continuing to release unique mobile games that can't be replicated on Nintendo devices is clearly the right play. And they only published incredibly creative and successful mobile games. Yep. Nothing else to say. Nothing else to say.
Unfortunately, the Pokémon Company learned the wrong lesson from these experiments, and decided it was apparently wise to continue making games for both console and mobile devices, which really felt like shooting themselves in the foot. Pokémon Rumble Rush was just a mobile port of the Wii and Wii U era Pokémon Rumble games. Pokémon Cafe Mix, now called Remix, was just another puzzle game released on both the Switch and mobile at the same time. Pokémon Quest was... I don't really know what it was, but it wasn't good, and it was on both the Switch and mobile. And now Pokémon Unite! The weird MOBA that really doesn't have anything to offer in comparison to other MOBAs, released on the Switch and mobile, again, at the same time.
And somehow it runs better on mobile than on the Switch, are you kidding me?
Yeah, recently it seems that the Pokémon Company's begun seeing the mobile market as another platform to release their Switch games to, instead of a different and unique platform in and of itself. Which is a darn shame, because Pokémon Go wasn't the only cool, unique mobile game idea they've had. Much like the PC, most of the mobile games are focused on young children, like Pokémon Playhouse, Magikarp Jump, Pokémon Smile, and Pokémon Sleep. But these games actually genuinely feel like good ideas and custom-made experiences for mobile devices. Pokémon Smile, for instance, is a genuinely cool way to encourage kids,
And admittedly me in college.
to brush their teeth twice daily, using a smartphone's front-facing camera to detect how well someone is brushing, and use that brushing quality as a method of catching Pokémon. That's awesome!
Plus, it has a really cute art style. Like, look at these.
However, despite the kiddie games and the ports of spin-offs from the console, there are a few mobile games that got really close to the uniqueness of Pokémon Go that I actually think were pretty cool. The first is Pokémon Masters, or now called Pokémon Masters EX, a unique 3v3 battle simulator where players can encounter and battle against famous trainers from across the Pokémon franchise, including the games and anime. Battles happen in real time instead of being turn-based, and while I was never personally interested in the game, mainly because it looks like a gacha game and I don't really like spending money on those, I still think that the focus on fan service by including popular trainers and the unique battle style is really cool.
But I can't deny it doesn't hold a candle to my favorite mobile Pokemon game of all time, Pokémon Duel.
Pokémon Duel was a mobile version of another physical Pokémon game, the Pokémon Trading Figure game. However, unlike the trading card game, very few people played the trading figure game. So Pokémon Duel was a lot of people's first exposure to the game, and I'm not gonna lie, it's so cool. Conceptually, it's kind of like chess, but your goal is to get to a certain space, and the only way to do so is by navigating across the board in a way that allows your pieces to knock out your opponent's pieces. However, unlike chess, where the attacking piece always eliminates whatever it's attacking, in Pokemon Duel, the two pieces spin and roll a random move, and the stronger move of the two wins. This means that you need to be strategic with what pieces you place where, because while some pieces have really strong moves, they also have a decent amount of space with weaker moves or even null space, which ultimately could lead to you losing your most valuable pieces by being too aggressive. Additionally, instead of reaching the opponent's goal, you can try to block the spaces your opponent uses to summon their own Pokemon figures and eliminate all of their pieces currently on the board, which means that they can't play, granting you the win. And that's extremely cool to me! Pokemon Duel was a fun mobile port of a physical game very few people have played, and it was one of the coolest apps I have ever had on my phone. It had a pretty solid single-player campaign, and a phenomenal way to play against other real players to see how your unique strategies held up.
And you might have noticed that I'm saying all of this in past tense.
Unfortunately, the Pokémon Company decided to retire Pokemon Duel in 2019, taking it down from all mobile stores and, even if you already had it installed on your device, preventing players from playing anything, even the single-player offline mode. Officially, the game was shut down due to Europe starting to crack down on games that used loot boxes, which Pokemon Duel absolutely did, but personally, I just think they were tired of trying to keep the game up to date and weren't making enough money off of it. Which is a huge shame because it was one of the most fun games I ever had on my phone. All the fun of chess matched up with the deck builder and the random outcomes of spinner battles, it was a super unique and exciting idea, and I'm genuinely upset they got rid of it.
Well, that's everything I have to say about Pokemon's off-console games. It's a little surprising that they have as many of them as they do, and while a lot of them are, pretty boring, some of them are actually really cool and unique experiences. I want to go ahead and give thanks again to Factor75 for sponsoring this video. Like I said it earlier already, link is in the description, and, well, to the Pokemon Company, please bring back Pokemon Duel. I'll do anything. You can put it back on mobile again, or you can put it on the Switch. You can put it on PC for all I can. Just bring it back. I miss Pokemon Duel.